I'm Alfonso Winker.
And I'm Trina Olson. And together, we're the co-founders of Team Dynamics.
And this is Behave.
To kick off today's show, how about we get into a question that we get asked a lot at Team Dynamics, which is, how on earth do we get ready to hold spaces like we hold, where the core conversations are about race, gender, misogyny, racism, and more? And how do we know if a training is going well or has been successful? Because we've seen some weird kinds of evaluations in our time. So if we are talking about issues of race and gender in America right now as it pertains to our bodies at work, that's
how would we ever know that it went well?
Yeah. How do you know?
Here's what's great. I don't ever know, and I always can reflect on if we were inside our boundaries and inside our values. And something we did as a team was we created our Team Dynamics framework of excellence for us as trainers so that we weren't ascribing to other people's versions of doing well.
Yeah, and why did that feel important?
I'm curious what you think. That feels important to me because there's so many kinds of training out there.
Yeah.
And there's so many schools of thought, and there's a difference between facilitation and training.
Right.
And, we really are we are leading people towards solutions, and we have a particular opinion and a belief about things happen, and we have a sort of wonky pedagogy that we use. And so in a time when more and more people are coming to awareness about a need for workplace conversation about race and gender,
yeah,
uninformed consumers, so the marketplace, just to get like a little wonky, the marketplace generally doesn't quite know what to ask for and doesn't quite know how to design for training. And if people have had experiences of diversity, equity, and inclusion training, it was either like court-ordered or about compliance, or they may have had a particularly triggering or tricky experience with it. So in the marketplace of companies looking for training, there's just a lot of misinformation or bad experiences. And so people sometimes ask for things that are developmentally out of order, or things that might actually cause more harm than good. So it's important to not chase clients or chase money for us to really reflect on this framework of excellence. So that's why it's important to me. How about you?
Well, I think what's interesting is whether you are running a staff meeting or you're doing supervision with one of your staff members, or you're thinking about your strategic plan, or you're in a conversation with your board, I think what's most important for me is that we told the truth. And I think, I was born in 1980, and I was part of the public school system in the United States, and really well-intentioned people who are smart and cared about me followed a curriculum that told me lies, right? And that's not to just try to be provocative or shocking, but we have right-sized and wrong-sized our history. And in some ways, when we think about the age of our country and being 400 years out from slavery in 2019, our country is the age of a toddler, right? We're like toddling around, and you're trying to figure out how to not touch the stove, and how to not run in the street, and how to not hit your brother, right? And I think we have a lot of undoing to really navigate as adults to be able to say, okay, we use words like slavery, or when we're talking about white nationalism and anti-Semitism, we will reference things like the Holocaust, but I don't know how many of us are visualizing chattel slavery as systematic torture, rape, and family ruin, right? Ripping families apart from each other. I don't know that we're calling things the right size that they are. And so when we think about things like workplace harassment, right? The actual pervasive nature of being dehumanized because you are in one kind of body is really fucking problematic. And so I think for us, it's not about like, let's go be shocking, but let's make sure that we got to a place where we all told the truth about the severity of what's happening, and we all told the truth about our responsibility to do something to make it better.
That's so powerful, because what a reckoning to come to a realization in the context of work that we are potentially and most likely not being honest with ourselves or with each other about our experiences of race and gender.
Ouch. It makes my heart hurt.
Ugh. And so we have to be careful.
Yeah.
Not comfortable.
Right.
But I think we're careful when we think about how to be excellent in our training, how to determine whether a training has gone well.
Yeah, we talk about this a lot, right? Because folks ask us questions like, what are you going to do to keep people comfortable in the conversations?
We're not
going to do that. I'm not even comfortable now, and I do this on purpose, and I chose it for a living every day. And so I do think, there's this interesting thing. I was listening to actually Elizabeth Gilbert promote one of her new books. I haven't read it yet, but it's a novel. But she was talking about safety and comfort. And she said, I'm just not sure we were put on the planet to experience high levels of safety and comfort. That doesn't seem to be what our ancestors and animals around us are showing us their lives are like, right? The point is not the opposite. The point is not just suffering. But I don't know that comfort's the goal, right? And so it's really interesting to think about being in a real and right relationship with people. And to do that, I need to be able to hear the truth of what's happening for somebody. And I think this idea that our goal is not ever discomfort. Let's just make people uncomfortable.
right.
Right? That's not what we're going for. But we know that if we stay really comfortable in the old untrue stories, we are going to perpetuate lies that are hurting ourselves and people we care about, which just, that cost is too high.
Well, and this is making me think about a conversation I know we've had before around sort of designing systems for people to be comfortable.
Yeah.
America was designed for white colonizers to be comfortable.
Correct.
So it meant that whole other kinds of people, indigenous people, black people, etc., needed to be stolen or displaced or, potential genocide, right? So it's like, if we're constructing something for the purpose of comfort, we are probably constructing it at the expense of someone else's comfort.
Right. And I think what keeps us super hopeful, and I know why you and I and the rest of the team find a lot of joy in this work every day, and we talk about that. It doesn't feel like drudgery to have really big, hard conversations about race and gender, is because we're focused on transformation. We believe that we as individuals can transform because we have experienced it firsthand by being in new kinds of relationships, by learning new things, by trying different practices. We know, because we have witnessed firsthand, that organizations can transform. They can go from feeling like toxic places where people do not feel listened to, valued, or respected to quite the opposite. And we absolutely know that the place that we live right now in the US can transform. It's been transforming and evolving all the time, right? The reason our name is Team Dynamics is we believe we are in this together as a team, and that the only constant is change. So transformation is so possible, and transaction is so not good enough.
And I think one of the ways that we hold ourselves accountable for helping groups and teams and organizations engage in that transformation is we always ask ourselves, is this what the group needs right now? Or is this what I'm in the mood for?
Yeah.
And we know that if we're just in the mood to do something, that we won't be able to say we did it right and we did it well and we did it in alignment with, within our boundaries and our values. If we're just doing what we're in the mood for as trainers, that's irresponsible. And so for any trainers or folks who sort of lead trade change processes that are listening, I think that's a powerful question, because we have to move from space to space and moment to moment, whether we're managing a team through a process or we're in HR and we're doing talent development or we are a trainer facilitator ourselves. We have to ask, am I just doing this because I'm in the mood for it? Or can I responsibly say that this is what this group of people needs right now?
Yeah, it makes me think of times in my career when I've really messed up around either sticking too tightly to an agenda or veering off too far from an agenda. And I've done both, right? So there have been times when I'm running a meeting and I've decided that what makes the meeting good is we stuck to the agenda and ended on time. Well, those are some metrics. Those may or may not be the right metrics when somebody drops a super creative, innovative, amazing idea into the meeting for conversation and we just skip over it because it's not on the agenda, even though it would make a huge impact in the work that we're doing and the people we seek to serve, right? So there have been times when I'm way too rigid and I'm not listening. And I think, you know what, my plan is more important than the actual content of what it is we're trying to do together. And then I've done vice versa, where I've gone really far afield on a tangent because like I was just thinking about something, or I was in the mood for something, or somebody asked if they could, you know, take a conversation in a different direction when in fact we had really important stuff we needed to get through, or we actually avoided talking about some of the harder stuff by getting distracted by some of the easier stuff. And so I think as a leader, as a manager, as a holder of space, as somebody who, for our listeners or any of you are driving programs, driving processes, it's holding tightly and lightly, right? So holding really tightly to your values and your goals and holding lightly to how you get there. So I think when I think about, you know, what is a good meeting, I've had to sort of reframe for myself for a good training or a good conversation about hard things. I've had to retrain myself, right? I used to think that if somebody cried in a space that meant it wasn't good and I must have done something wrong or somebody was doing something wrong. Now I'm so clear. That's just a way people show human emotion. It isn't an indicator that anything good or bad happened. It's an indicator that somebody had a feeling, right? And so I have to always reverse engineer from why do I think that just sticking to the agenda is important, or why do I think that making sure everybody talks is the most important thing? Is it? I don't know. It depends on what we're trying to do. You're listening to Behave, and we'll be right back.
Why can't you behave? Oh, why can't you?
Welcome back. So folks are probably wondering, you know, people always tell us we want the stories, we want the ideas, but we also want to know how. If we're talking about behave, tell us how to behave. So of course, behavior should always be driven by a goal, and we want to offer to you how we do check-ins. So Trina, will you share the questions that we ask ourselves in reflection, and then I can talk about how we praise ourselves and also consider ways in which we want to improve for next time.
Yes. And I will also say we have learned by talking with one another when is the right time to do the reflection. For some of us, it's really important to do it like in the same room right after. That's kind of how our memories in our brains work. Other folks need a couple minutes. Other folks need a couple hours. Other folks need to sleep on it. So just another way to think about all the options you have of really doing a smart debrief of potentially a hard or really important conversation or training. So one of the questions we ask is, what did we learn about ourselves as the holders of the space, the leader of the meeting, the trainer, the facilitator? What did we learn about our clients, the participants? So did we create an environment where we had the opportunity to learn even more about their context, their barriers, their opportunities? The third question, what do we want to share with our colleagues for the future? So oftentimes we're working at places that are big enough that we're just not all in the same room at the same time. And you might have some really cool breakthroughs, some important breakdowns, some important ahas, some big questions you're chewing on. So what needs to come out of the experience into the work? And how do we responsibly make sure that we're sharing what happened in the room?
We are, as adults, always talking to other adults that we are the only people in our control. So for this next piece that I'm going to offer, it's important to do it in the context of what was in our control. So if the CEO stands up and says, this is inappropriate, or a member of the team says, this isn't the content we should be talking about at all, I want to talk about the budget, right? That's not in our control. How other people act in the room is not in our control. But when we debrief together and we talk about what went well and what we can improve, we do it in the context of things that were inside of our control. So I can, of course, say it hurt my feelings when that person said the thing that was disrespectful, but I can't go back in time and change that, right? Or I wish the air conditioning hadn't broken halfway through and then I was really warm. That's not something that was in my control. So we do this next piece around things that were in our control. We mentioned last episode our process of doing a plus, delta plus. So these are the exact questions that we consider. The first plus, catch ourselves doing something well that really mattered. So what did I do well, or what did you do well that really, really mattered in this particular training? Then the delta, something we would change. What one thing, if we did it better next time, would make the biggest difference? So something that is in my control that I could do differently or more or less of that would actually make a difference in helping the content land or helping someone have a breakthrough. And then closing with another positive. What else did we do really well that we should be sure to repeat? So sometimes we'll say, you told a new story, let's write that down, because I think if you tell that story more or more frequently or in other contexts, it'd be really useful. So it really resonated. So something that maybe was off the cuff or something we experimented with or something that we just have really locked in and said, wow, we're really proud of how we've done that. Let's make sure to repeat that because it would be incredibly impactful.
And I want to draw attention to the language that you used in the plus, the delta, and the plus, because I think gone are the days of evaluations where folks are asking questions that aren't getting us helpful answers, like, what was your favorite part? Did you like it? What did you like about them? Right? There's very little. I mean, there's nothing that I like about racism and misogyny. So the idea of being in a conversation about it, it's not like, here's my favorite part. Like, I have favorites. Like, I have a favorite color. I have a favorite dessert. I don't have a favorite part of a conversation. That felt really personally challenging to me as a white person, as a cisgendered person. And so, again, it's not about just seeking compliments. It's about those meaningful questions of, so did we learn? Did we grow? Did we move the needle? Did we transform? So that also people don't get in that rut of saying, well, it wasn't fun, so I don't want to do it anymore.
Producer Levi is going to take our Team Dynamics Trainer Framework for Excellence and make sure that it is posted alongside this episode at teamdynamicsmn.com/behave. We give it as an offering to you, our community of champions for justice and behaviors. Some pieces may be really relevant to your work. Some pieces may not be. What's important is that you consider your own framework for excellence so that you know if you're a person that leads process or teams or trains, how will you know that you've done well? And how will you measure yourself? And how will you debrief?
As we close out today and we think about really what excellence and success looks like around some of these really important conversations, maybe we can leave our listeners with a story of you introducing me to a Netflix program during a very long layover in an airport very late at night.
Yes, it was the worst day of our lives.
Travel-wise.
Okay. And, oh boy. I mean, like everything that could have everything that could have happened.
We were literally landing. Just kidding. The wheels came back up and they were like, never mind.
We're not going to go here. And then we were redirected and then we were on different planes. And then they were like, there's no plane. And then
we landed in the wrong city.
So we found ourselves in the wrong city and in the middle of the night. And people were like playing charades and like singing songs. And it got really weird. And so we just like went in a corner of this empty, dark airport. And we opened up my laptop and we fired up the Netflix. And we watched the documentary series program 7 Days Out.
So what's amazing about it is it's about the 7 days before a really big event or moment. And it's in totally different sectors. There's one about space. There's one about dog shows. There's one about, it gets
horse racing.
Yes. But so the restaurant episode is my favorite. I swear to you, I have watched it at least 5 times by this point.
It's a good, like, have your friends over and, like, watch this interesting thing and, like,
also eating and watching other people eating. One of my favorite things to do. So this all relates to training in, I promise you, such a legit way that I have a Post-it from this episode on the whiteboard in my living room when I think about us building out trainings. So there's this chef and there's this front of house manager, and it's of the best restaurant in the world that gets voted by restaurant people. And they're doing a huge renovation and a huge relaunch, which is really risky. And as best I know, the restaurant business is already really risky. And they have spent their careers together co-defining what excellence looks like. So there is complete clarity across their entire staff about what the goals are and what a good night even sounds like in the dining room. And so the chef was really clear that he had 4 elements that meant excellence. And they feel so transferable to me that I think about them when we build content every single time. The elements are: number 1, is this delicious? And I think trainings and conversations can be delicious. So is it juicy? Is it unctuous? Is it umami? Is it delicious?
Unctuous is probably one of our top 5 favorite shared words.
Yeah, it's true. Number 2, is it beautiful? So we deeply believe that the diversity of a human experience and our mix makes us have a more rich and beautiful experience than we could ever have alone. And so we also know that part of being embodied is getting to use our senses. So when we think about having dance, having music, having visuals, right? We can't just be talked at as adults and transform. Research shows that doesn't work. So do we also have a beautiful experience? Is it creative? We know that for, in fact, centuries, we have known what the truth is about whose backs we built this economy on and whose land we stole. But those facts seems not to have been enough to create the transformation, right? So we have got to do something different. We have got to get creative and use all of our creative juices in order to actually transform, to create the equitable outcomes and the inclusive communities that we want. And then the 4th, I think, is both of our favorites.
The crown jewel.
You go ahead.
The last question.
Yeah.
Does it make sense that this even exists?
Hello. Say it again.
Does it make sense that this even exists?
We are not here for throwaway icebreakers, throwaway conversations, throwaway agendas, meaning, okay, we all got in a room and talked about a thing, but it didn't move anywhere, and it wasn't the right format, and it wasn't the right length of time, and the right people weren't in the room. Well, then why are we doing it? Let's make sure, based on our goals, that we are doing something together that is moving the needle. So we have to make sure that whatever we're building, before we walk in a room and just can never get that hour of our life back, does it even make sense that this exists? So an offering, I think that what we need is all around us. And so we are not just inspired by other trainers, but other practitioners who care about excellence. And in this case, restaurateurs.
We're curious how you are defining excellence and training in your body of work. Send us a tweet at Team Dynamics LLC. Make sure to like and subscribe and leave a review. We want to know how much you love behaving. Thanks for hanging out. Make good choices. Behave is produced by Levi Weinhagen in Studio G at the Glenn Nelson Center. That's at the bottom of all of our tiny prints.
Come at me, bro.
It's copyright Team Dynamics.
Come at me, bro.
Do not distribute without permission. Come at me, bro.
No, that's going to be on our branded